talking about case analysis 1, which is talking about a case in which Joe is a financial person in a company, and he's been told that he needs to get money from somewhere. So we're really going to cover the facts of the case, the rationalization of Joe, kind of a value analysis, the trade-off analysis, and then ultimately an action analysis. So for a factual analysis, these were kind of the four main things that I thought were important to the case itself. So ultimately, the first thing is the delayed part. This is kind of where it all kicks off and why Joe needs to make this kind of ethical decision. So the delayed part was really important part to one of the company's one of their most successful products. And with this delayed part, they haven't been able to make it. And so the company needs $300,000 to increase their working capital. This is kind of on top of a $600,000 reserve that they already have. They're also not willing to sell off any of their current assets to make that $300,000 or to increase that working capital. So Joe comes up with this great idea to delay paying bills to the creditors by about 4 days to get $300,000. He also sees that the company, those suppliers in a couple months will probably be saying that, oh, you need to start paying us back. And that's when and he was like, oh, but by that time we would start paying them, so it wouldn't be an issue. And he kind of talked about this idea to a colleague who doesn't really think that this is the most ethical thing to do. And Joe really didn't see any problem with it until this colleague had brought up the ethical issues with it in the first place. And so now he's kind of in this dilemma of what should he do. So there are quite a few rationalizations Joe could have to this ethical issue. First is hurry. He needs to solve this issue quickly since they're trying to get their working capital to increase, which can take a little bit. And then also they want to look good to their financial investors. You can also see this as just an ends to justify the means. Like, this is a one-time thing that in the long term will help the company more than it hurts its suppliers. Materiality is also a really big one. It's not really hurting anyone since they're going to end up paying the suppliers back. And so it's not going to hurt them in any way. And then it also doesn't really hurt anyone in the company that bad because they're not doing anything to directly hurt them. They're keeping the company afloat and making them look good as well. Additionally, Joe might have some loyalty to the company. He's a pretty big financial person in the company, so he wants to do a good job and wants to make the company look good and keep his job. And additionally, obedience is probably a big one since his boss is asking him to do this. And so he could just say he's just following orders, as anyone probably would say. So for the value analysis, the biggest one that I found was trust. It kind of just seems that Joe was breaking the trust of not only its suppliers, but also its financial investors as well. He's kind of coming up with this money from nowhere that the company doesn't really have. And he's not paying his suppliers up front, which is kind of a lack of transparency on their part and saying that they need the money now, and so they won't have time to pay them back. So I thought that was the biggest one for me I saw was the trust. So yeah, and for the financial investors, they're the ones who see that working capital and kind of make their investments based off of that, and which is why they want to increase it. And so when they're coming up with $300,000 that is actually going to be used for paying loans later on, it kind of inflates that working capital in a not realistic way. So which is kind of highly unethical, I think, in terms of their investors and trust. So the trade-off analysis is fairly straightforward, honestly. He can go with the plan that he currently has, and he'll get the money, but break the trust of suppliers and their investors. But if he doesn't go with the plan, the company won't have that money, will look bad in terms of financially, and also will look bad financially, but they'll maintain that trust, transparency, and trust with its suppliers and investors that it currently has. But yeah, looking bad financially is something that they're trying to avoid. And then for our action analysis, I kind of came up with 4 options of bad, good, better, worse. So the worst one, the bad one, is going to be going with that current plan that Joe's come up with. I mean, if it's already being called out by his colleague for unethical issues, obviously it's kind of bad from the start. So going with the current plan of not saying anything to suppliers, just delaying the payments and going on with it and getting $300,000 is kind of like the worst thing that you can do. The next thing, the good option would be to just kind of talk to the suppliers and say that you are going to be late on your payments, and at least telling them that you're going to be delaying your payment for a little bit because you need that $300,000. But again, you really don't have that money, and you're going to end up spending it for the loans anyways. And so even though you are having that transparency with suppliers, you're still lacking that transparency or that trust with your financial investors. So it's kind of a little bit of an issue as well. So it's not that great. Your better option would be to find another source of income. We kind of thought of this, I kind of thought of this maybe like for the company, maybe they could just like find crowdfunding somewhere, or they could find something else they could be selling, or just finding any other sort of way to find income for the company that is not from their loans would be a much more honest way of kind of increasing that working capital than the current plan. And then I think the best option would be to work with the boss and discuss the decisions that they should be making. Just because ultimately, like, talking about it and discussing it and like empathizing with your boss, like, yeah, like, we need to find money, but I can't just like create money out of nowhere, especially with delaying the loans. And so kind of discussing with them what they think they should do would be the best option, I would say. Just because it's better to talk out the decisions, and this shouldn't be something that just one person is making, but maybe a group of or a team of people should be making ultimately within a company. So yeah, that would be my best option for the company itself, and is something that I would say that Joe should look into doing.